Good evening, guys. How are you? I hope everyone's well. And I hope you enjoyed the weekend's tasting on Chardonnay. I know it was an interesting one for me personally. I don't always drink Chardonnay. If I do, I normally wouldn't drink an Aussie Chardonnay. And I changed my own mind this weekend, happily. It was fantastic to taste a style of wine I would normally have not gone for. A slightly oaky Chardonnay. It was a beautiful wine, and it really stood up well, I thought, against the classic old world style of a Chablis, which less oaky, cleaner tasting. I thought they were both excellent, so I hope you enjoyed it too. Now, I've had a lot of requests the last couple of weeks for a red tasting, so this week we're moving on to the reds, just to keep everyone happy. I hope if you normally drink white, you will give us a go on this one. So with that being said, we're going to go for medium-bodied wines this week, so medium-body reds. So in the last few weeks, what we've been doing, we've been looking at the same grape, grown in a different area, and comparing those styles. What we're doing this time is comparing styles, if you like. So we're going for the same style of wine, different grapes, different regions, and seeing what comprises that style. So it might be that the grapes are different, it might be that it's grown somewhere else, but in terms of its style, we call it the same thing, whether it's here or here, that it was grown. So how does that work? What's the differences that we might pick up on that? So that when we're looking at a style of wine on a menu, for example, we would know to say, okay, well, just because my partner wants to choose this style of wine doesn't mean actually I'm going to like it. So there's stuff to look at here. So as I said, we're going for mid-bodied wines in this one. We're going to compare two mid-body reds. One is from a small appellation called Fitou in southern France, and the other is from a place called Florina in Macedonia. I slipped my mind in for a moment. Yeah, in Macedonia. So they're both mid-body. What does that mean? You classify wine in terms of its body generally by the alcohol level, okay? So anything below 12.5%, we would say is a light wine, light body. So there you might have a Pinot Noir, for example, or you might have a Pinot Grigio if it's a white wine. Often they fall under that level. Maybe a Pinot Gris. You know, I know we have a New Zealand Pinot Gris in the bar that's fantastic, the ELR, and that's about 12.5% or something. Next up, you've got your mid-bodies, so anything over 12.5%, but not over 13.5%, that's a mid-bodied wine. So in that classification in our bar, for example, you're going to have your Bordeaux's. If you're talking reds, if you're talking white, you might have a nice Grüner Veltliner or something like that would fall into that region. So it's not a really light tasting wine. If it's a white, it's going to have something to it. And the same with the reds. If it's a red, it's not going to be dominated by maybe a light strawberries and cherry flavored wines like your Gamay are. It's going to be a bit heavier, maybe a little bit of darker fruit starting to push their way in there. And anything over 13.5%, that's your full-bodied wines. Why does alcohol make the wine lighter or heavier? I guess it's simple fluid physics or dynamics or something. The amount of alcohol in liquid literally makes it more viscous, or heavier. So in your mouth, when you take a mouthful of wine that's got 12% 12% alcohol in it, there's less alcohol in that fluid, so in your mouth it's going to feel a little less hard to push around. It's a bit lighter in your mouth than a wine that's 14.5%, for example. It's going to be thicker in your mouth and harder to push around. It just makes your mouth feel fuller, you know. Therefore, we have these phrases light, medium, or full-bodied wines, and they apply to both white and reds. So we're going to go for two mid-bodied. I thought mid-bodied's a good one to go for this time of the year. It's warm. It's sunny. Not everyone likes drinking big heavy reds all year round. Lots of people seasonal with their wine drinking, you know, they'll have a big red in the winter, and as soon as the sun comes out, they throw the red back into the cellar and they get their rosés or they get their white wines out. So this is a kind of a happy medium, I thought. If you're not a huge big red wine drinker, you might like these ones because they're easier to approach. If you do like your red wines, they're still delicious, still got a lot of fruit going on, but they might not be what you'd normally drink, so you might try something different. So let's have a little quick chat about these two wines, set you up for the weekend. So the first wine we're having is called Paranga, and this is the Greek wine from Macedonia. So Macedonia is northern Greece, so it's actually in the southern Balkans, this region, and it is mainly comprises of the ancient kingdom of Macedon, which is a mountainous old kingdom. Alexander the Great was from there, I think. You can check me on that one, I'm not sure, I think he was there. But it's a very mountainous region, and it's one of the, well, Greece in general is one of the oldest wine producing regions in the world, as you probably know. That whole kind of region has got history going back thousands of years. In fact, in Greece, I think they found evidence of wine growing and grape crushing going back 6,500 years, which is, it's mind-blowing, really is mind-blowing. And then I think, as far as I remember, this region, the particular region we're talking about for this wine, Florina, is one of the main key viticultural regions in Greece. So even though it's quite a mountainous region, they produce a lot of wine, and that is hugely important to agriculture in Greece. So this is where our wine is grown there. It's up on a plateau, this particular vineyard. That's what it's called, the Aminteo Plateau, I think it's called, which sits around 500 to 700 meters plus in altitude, surrounded by mountains. There's a few big lakes around as well in this region where the vineyards are. So you've got quite an unusual climate, I guess, for Greece. I mean, Greece is known as a very hot country. I think if you've been on holiday out there, you'll know it's roasting hot in the islands down south. We're talking far north in the mountains. It's going to be a very different kettle of fish up there. So it's a temperate climate in this region, with microclimates brought in by the mountains, obviously affecting the weather, and the lakes also affecting the winds and probably the moisture levels as well, I'd imagine. So in this region, as far as I understand from reading around the subject, there's significantly less rainfall than in regions southeast, where they grow a lot of wine as well, and may be more famous for some of the wines that you might get in Greece. There's also more sunshine. So it's quite a dry, temperate climate with a lot of sunshine, which is good for grapes in certain styles you might want to go for. In terms of the terroir, then, so you know you've got your weather you're kind of talking about here, you know your climate. What about the soil? The soil here is alluvial, so that's liquid water deposited sediment that gets a bad name. It's basically mud. You might say it's compressed mud, but it's clay particles, fine clay particles and minerals, and then it's on top of this stuff is on top of a nice rich strata of calcium and calcium deposits. So you're going to have, essentially, you've got a soil that's going to be pretty dry, well draining. It's going to be warm because there's sun beating down on it. So it's going to be, I mean, technically we would say this is a low fertility soil, and that is actually what you want for a lot of grapes, for a lot of vines, because it makes the vines work harder and stops them being quite as vigorous, or maybe as growing too fast and growing too many grapes, as we've talked about in the past. So you kind of want your vines to work hard and produce good quality grapes rather than a lot of fruit all the time, which takes the quality down of the grapes essentially. So the soil sounds good for me. You know, this sounds like it could definitely work. So the grapes that they're growing on this soil, now in this region, you've got your Zinamavro grape. If you've had that before, it's pretty famous grape for good Greek wines. We've had a Zinamavro in the bar before. It's a lovely, can get quite a spicy grape. So this one, they've got a Zinamavro in there. They've got a couple of our old friends as well from France. They've got a Syrah, and they've got Merlot grapes in there as well. So it's a nice little blend. Now, you probably know the flavours of Syrah and Merlot fairly well. So you're thinking, okay, well, how's this going to be a mid-bodied wine? Because they're often in heavier wines in France or in Australia. You know, you might find those two grapes in heavier wines. The Zinamavro grape, the addition of that is going to be the thing that's going to throw this slightly for you and maybe make it taste slightly different and change the body of it due to its alcohol levels and the way they've blended the other two grapes in. But the Zinamavro grape is going to bring some interesting flavours. So it's known as a very Mediterranean grape. So you're talking Mediterranean flavors in there. So what we're thinking, black olives, we're thinking maybe some tomatoes, some kind of herbal tastes going on in there as well. You mix that in with the classic old flavors we're going to get from our Merlots, which you're often going to get your red fruits in there, and your Syrahs, you're going to get some peppers. I think we're going to have quite an interesting little number here. Looking forward to it. I hope you are as well. We're going to put this one up against an old favourite of mine. I don't know if you guys have had this as well, but it's a Fitou. Now the Fitou region is a small appellation, well, relatively small appellation in southern France. It's in between Narbonne and Perpignan, down south there, right on the Mediterranean, pretty close to the Spanish border actually. Fitou is one of the oldest, it's the oldest red wine producing appellation in Languedoc actually, I think, and it was there's mentions of it way back, I think in the 1100s, for example. I think Philippe Augustus, King of France, mentions it. So I know it's been there a while, maybe not as, haven't been making it as long as they've been making the stuff out in Greece, that's for sure. They can't compete with that 6,500 years, but it's been there a wee while. Fitou producing good wines. And from my experience, the wines are not particularly typical of that region. So as I said, this is a mid-bodied wine chat we're having. Fitou sits in a very hot region. You've got Carcassonne and the Black Mountains in that area. You've got Mediterranean region, you've got coastal plains. The particular vineyards we're talking about here are slightly up, I think, in the foothills off of the coast. So they're heading up towards the Black Mountain foothills, but they're still pretty low down. We're not talking the same as the Macedonian vineyards, I don't think. Quite low down in the hills. We're talking very dry still. We're talking not a lot of rain going on here, and we're talking pretty hot climate. In terms of the soil that we're looking at growing these grapes on in Fitou, we're talking shale, and we are talking limestone again. So again, it's a loose soil, it's going to be quite well draining. Again, that hot sun on it's going to be warm. Again, it's going to make these vines work quite hard. And one thing to think about actually here with these grapes in this region, you might be thinking, well, how's Phil going to produce a mid-bodied wine from this area? Given what he said, it's going to be hot and dry. The wine, you might or might not know what this means, but Quatre Vents means, it's the name of the wine. Quatre Vents means the four winds. So there's four local winds that hit this vineyard where the particular wine is grown that we're going to be drinking. These winds serve to moderate the temperature of the vineyards, thankfully. So if you've been down to Fitou, if you've been to Carcassonne or anywhere like that, you're probably familiar with some of the wines down there. If not Fitou, you're probably familiar with your big Carignans. So we're talking Corbières or your Minervois, right? If you've had them, you'll know that the region produces these big, hot, full-bodied wines. These are hot country, hot sun, full-bodied reds. Hell of a lot of body, spicy, deep fruit flavors, quite heady wines. You're probably thinking, well, how can Fitou produce a wine right in that region that's not going to be like that? How is it going to be mid-body? So as I say, these winds that are coming in to the vineyards serve to cool down the grapes, to cool down the vineyards a bit and stop it getting quite so bakingly hot. Now I hope, I'll be annoyed if I've been proven wrong. Actually, it's a full-body wine, but we should find this is quite a mid-body wine because of that climate and the terroir there. It's going to alter the characteristics of what might otherwise be a full-bodied, big old red wine. They're using similar grapes. In fact, they're using the same grapes in the Fitou that they use in your Corbières. So Corbières is typically a Carignan Grenache blend. The Carignan grape is the local kind of speciality, if you like, of that Languedoc region in general, not just Fitou, but also your other regions, Corbières and so on. And that grape is characterized by getting a nice big full-bodied licorice flavors and a bit of spice going on in it in this area, taking on the local terroir of nice herbal flavors. but it's a big grape. And they often, as I say, with the Carignan, they blend that with the Grenache, and they have that in your Corbière, and that is a big, heavy wine. What they're doing with the Fitou is they're keeping that Corbière grape, so they're taking the Carignan out of the Corbière, but they're blending it, not just with the Grenache, but they're also blending it with a Mourvèdre and a Syrah, and still managing to keep it mid-bodied, which is, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing this one and tasting it. But it really marries, for me, this is marrying the union of two of my favourite kind of styles of red, if you like. You've got a Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blend, or a GSM, you might have heard this before. Huge in Australia and very common in southern France and southern Rhone region all the way down to Languedoc. And they're also blending that with your Carignan Grenache blend, which for your Corbière lovers out there, including me, is just a wonderful blend. So you're blending those two big wines and making something smaller and lighter. I'm intrigued. I'm not sure how it's going to work, and if I'm going to wish it was a bigger wine. I don't know. So we'll find out. If you do want to join in with this tasting, I'm afraid to say that all the bottles that we bought for this week have gone. As I said, everyone was really excited for a red tasting, I think. So those bottles that we bought have gone. However, as usual, if you do want to join in on Saturday, you can get hold of, I'd imagine you can get hold of a Fitou in Co-op or in Tesco's or something like that. They're not the cheapest ones, and if you do see one that's very cheap, it probably won't be very good. But it's worth trying to pick up a Fitou if you can. And in terms of the Greek, that might be harder. I'm not sure if you get one in the supermarkets. You could certainly have a look around, and if you do find a Greek wine, try and make sure it's medium bodied, so nothing over 13.5%. And look on the back and see if it's got the Zinna Mavro grape in it, and hopefully blended with some Syrah Merlot as well, okay? If you can't find exactly that, you can get a mid-bodied Zinna Mavro. You won't be a mile away, okay? So see what you can find. And then if you do want to join in next week, obviously, for the next wine tasting after this one, just got to be quick off the mark at the moment, guys. We're still kind of finding our feet with this to see how many people want to join in each week. So at the moment, we're not ordering stacks and stacks and stacks of wine. If you do want to join in, do let me know as soon as you can, and that way we can make sure you get your bottles and we'll deliver them to you for Friday prior to the tasting, okay? So for those of you who've got the bottles, looking forward to Saturday. For those of you who are looking for the bottles, do hit me up if you find something in the supermarket you're like, Phil, will this do? Send me a picture of it if you want on Facebook or something, and I'll let you know if that's going to work. But a Fitou should be fine, so just then it's the Greek one that might be difficult. Right, guys. I'm looking forward to Saturday. It's been a while since I've drank red wine, so it could be fun. Sunday won't be fun, I'm sure. We'll deal with that at the time, all right? Okay, guys, have a good week.